Should the Florida State Seminoles seek out a quarterback in the transfer portal?
You are Locked On Seminoles, your daily podcast on the Florida State Seminoles, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome back into another episode of Locked On Seminoles. Thank you for making this your first listen each and every day. We are part of the awesome Locked On Network, and you can find us for free wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. This podcast is a lot of fun. Please help me grow it as well. Find that like button, hit that notification bell, share this podcast, and comment. And believe me, based on today's show, this is one that I expect a lot of comments on. We are going to focus on the transfer portal that opens up on the 1st of December, and we are going to focus on the needs for the Noles. And of course, with any roster, college or pro, you got to start with quarterback. Jordan Travis is moving on. Could it be Tate Rodemaker? Could it be somebody else? I'm going to talk about 3 quarterbacks that are really going to be helping to quote unquote set the trend, among others, in the transfer portal. And then we're going to talk about Florida State's needs overall. And then the college football playoff, because it's going to impact the portal as well. I think there are a few guys that are still playing that may end up going to the NFL if they have the kind of end to the 2023 season that they want. So with that, without further ado, do I think Florida State needs a transfer quarterback? Absolutely, I do, until otherwise proven. This is the rule, and this is what I have been told. This is not a Florida State thing. This is just information in general from multiple coaches, and then just talking to other scouts. Some other people kind of convinced me of this as well, so I'm running in line. If you bring in a quarterback that is more experienced, has more proven on-film college-level performance, even if that costs you somebody on your depth chart, chances are it's the better move for your program. There are exceptions for any different school. It could be Florida State, Florida, whatever. You have to always consider the portal, and here's why. Look at the teams across college football, and let's just use the Deep South, schools that are close to Florida State. If you do not have good quarterback play, where are you? You're going to lose, right? It's no big deal to even go any further. You're not going to get very far. Georgia's got great defense, but boy, their quarterback play has been pretty consistent the last few years. They won 2 titles. They got another chance this year because they had a quarterback step in. He'd been in their system a couple of years. They got lucky. That's the exception, not the rule. Look at Georgia Tech. Haynes King transfers over from A&M. That place has been a sieve for good quarterback play. So he goes to Georgia Tech, and they figured it out. At least he had some experience. These types of things are a part of it. 400 or 500 passes, give or take, is the minimum, is the rule that I go with. On how far a kid's got to get into college before he starts to figure it out, before the speed slows down. And the numbers have bared that out for a long, long time. So Tate Rodemaker's played 1 game. He was 12 for 25 for 134 yards, no touchdowns, no picks as the starter. I mean, he's played some for the Noles. If he just lights it up against Louisville and he does something really good in the playoff, we could have a different discussion. As of the 30th of November, when this podcast is going to air, these are my thoughts. Again, this can change, but right now, yes, without question. If you take anything else from this podcast, flat out, Florida State needs to get a transfer portal quarterback, because they're going to have another good roster next year, because they're going to get a lot of portal kids after this great 23 season. Mark it down. They're going to do well in the portal, flat out. And recruiting's on the uptick. If they get the right quarterback, and again, we'll talk about that here in just a second, you can have another top 10 team. Do you want to waste that opportunity if Rodemaker doesn't play well against Louisville and or the bowl game, and then go into spring without a transfer quarterback that maybe you could have made a run at? That doesn't make sense to me. And again, the people that I've spoken to, college coaches, scouts, etc., I haven't had anybody tell me yet in any convincing fashion that you should just always stick with your guns with the guys on your roster. That's especially true the first time you go up against one of your rivals. Let's say you did that, and that other school, whoever it is, whatever program you are, took a transfer quarterback and then beat you with it. That'll stick in your craw a little bit. So here are the 3 guys that I'm just going to use as an example. And to be clear, before I name any of these, 2 notes. Number 1, There are a ton of guys in the portal. A ton more are going to go into the portal. And finally, there's a little speculation with it. The first guy I'm going to mention, the reason I'm bringing him up is twofold. Number one, he's a great fit for what I think Norvell likes to do and kind of what he did with Jordan Travis. And two, he's the one that's getting talked about the most, that I've gotten the most conversation about talking to people on the record, off the record. And that's Cameron Ward at Washington State. He's expected to go in the portal. Lord only knows by the time I finish this podcast, before I even upload it, he may have entered. I don't know. But that's the guy that most people are talking about. Again, dynamic quarterback. He's not Jordan Travis athletic, but he's pretty darn athletic. And I've got numbers on him, different types of stats, and I've seen him play. He's a very, very good player. We're going to talk about what it takes to get him. I don't know if any of you saw a certain comment from a head coach at Nebraska. He's saying $1 to $2 million to get a great quarterback. We'll talk a little bit about how that works too and how the school pays or who pays. I'll give you a little hint on that. But we're going to talk about three guys and why they can transcend a program like Florida State, even next year in 24, when people think, you know what, this team's going to take a step back. If you get one of these kids, you can actually take a step up. So first off, we will talk about Cameron Ward. He started out, this is a great story. He's from South Texas, small town. He goes to Incarnate Word. It's a school in San Antonio, podunk school, very private, religious, the whole nine. Transfers to Washington State and murders it. Murders it. This past season, these are the numbers for Ward. Again, he's got Washington State's receiver. He doesn't have what Florida State has. 323 of 485, 66.5%, 3,736 yards, 25 touchdowns, 7 picks. What would he have had if he had Johnny and Keon? Any of the guys, like Jaheim Bell, etc. Anybody like that to add. They had some decent players at Washington State, but you can't teach 6'4", 6'7" to begin with. That's, it's not fair. And they've got really, really dynamic skills with those big catches. His numbers would have went up. 2, when he's under pressure, he does pretty well. Pro Football Focus does a lot of things, and people, myself included, sometimes bitch about their grades. But one thing that's very interesting, even if it's close, how well do you perform when a guy is in your face? It's hard. 290-pound defensive tackle gets through. That's not fun. He still hits around 40% of his passes under duress like that. Believe it or not, that's pretty good. Riley Leonard hits, he's the kid from Duke. Most expect to end up at Notre Dame. I think Ward is a better prospect, and they're both mobile and would both completely fit the offense that Norvell and the Noles run. But I think Ward is better because he hits, what I call the money shots when you're about to get shot right in the chest with the shoulder pad. Sometimes you got to look down the gun barrel and take that hit. It's hard. So here is the key stat. And this is from PFF. And I'm going to give a couple of years for Ward. I'm just using him as the major barometer here. The other two I'm going to use are Riley Leonard and Will Rogers, the kid at Mississippi State that entered the portal. He's got a ton of yards. He's had a really good career. Unfortunately for him, being at State, let's be really honest, that's difficult because, they just play in the SEC West and they get beat up on. But Ward in 2022, passing depth, what does that mean? Cameron Ward throwing the ball like 20 yards down the field, etc. In 22, he was only 11 of 43. That's pedestrian. It's not very good. 25.6%, 390 yards, 9 yards per 2 touchdowns, 4 picks. Not good. This year, completely different animal. The light, as they say, has gone on. 23 of 57, 40.4%. This is, again, deeper throws. Its likelihood of being complete is much lower. 40.4%, so he went up almost 15%. It was 14.8. 725 yards, 12.7 yards per attempt, 10 touchdowns, 2 picks. A 5-to-1 ratio on that is elite. And he's at Washington State. The Pac-12 is pretty damn good this year. Oregon, Washington are the class, but Utah's got a heck of a defense. UCLA's got a heck of a defense. Oregon State is not friendly. That's a really good year. And he did it again with Washington State's talent. I just want you to think in your head, and this is open-ended because I'm not going to get into a ton of it just yet, but we're going to talk about Florida State's basic needs, but let's just say they get 2 or 3 big-time players or whatever positions you want. I'm going to go into that here in just a moment. If you add this kind of player to what Florida State can do, could they be in playoff contention again? I think so. And you should too, because this is the kind of kid that can do that. Riley Leonard, same kind of deal, but only 33% under duress, give or take. He was 41.2% in 22. This year he's banged up so much. I'm using 22 stats for him. 685, 13.4, and 10 and 2 again. He's really good in those kind of situations, throwing down the field. That's what Leonard does the best. Will Rogers, different offense with the air raid, way different. Truly a pocket kid. 10 of 29, 34.5%, 349, 12 yards per attempt's pretty good, but 4 touchdowns, 1 interception. Mississippi State's offense was so bad this year. It was so poorly coached. They completely changed everything. They were reducing from the air raid, and it was just a bad fit. Good for Will that he's going to get a chance to go finish his career somewhere else. I don't think he's got the arm strength necessarily to be an NFL quarterback. Maybe he can hang on and be the third guy or something on the roster, but he's very accurate, and I really enjoy watching him play. So we'll get into that. I'm going to talk about Florida State on the next season with what they need. Like if they only took like 3 guys out of the portal, and I know they're going to take more. Let me be clear. I don't need everybody emailing me on this. What positions would I want and what would I need to get them in contention to win the ACC again and to be basically at the same spot they're now, competing for one of the top 4 spots? They would obviously, if they're 12-0 next year, make the playoff, but it's about position. You want one of those first 4 spots so you get a bye. If you don't get the bye, the chances you win in the title are really, really low. So without further ado, before we go into that, something else you need to know about eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. What brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle, well it up to peak performance, from the superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. 122 million parts for your number one ride or die. You'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay's guaranteed fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your cash back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need and the prices you want, it's your turn to turn your car into MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay guaranteed fit only, available to U.S. customers. All right. What positions would I want if I could only have 3 choices? And if you want to comment on this, fire away. I think number 1, beyond, I'll play it a little extra. Quarterback is obvious. Everybody should pick quarterback. If you don't want to, go ahead. But I'm going to leave that out as just the duh. I want to pick 3 separate aside from quarterback. I'm going to add a little caveat here to my own question. I'm going to go pass rusher because they're going to lose Verse. Patrick Payton's a hell of a pass rusher. Don't get me wrong. But when you have 2 that are proven and you can rotate guys, because they've got a few other young guys coming up, if you can continue to rotate those players and keep guys fresh, look what it did for FSU against Florida. At the end of the game, Patrick got 2 sacks. I believe it was like the last drive or next to last drive for Florida. I forget. Somebody can correct me if they want to make a comment. But it was him and Verse working off of each other. The quarterback for Florida was running for his life. And then anything that came through the middle, whether it was some kind of trap where they set him up, like I'm going this way and they trapped and the O-line gets going the wrong direction, whoops back around. It's technically a stun, but I call it a trap because they just fool them right down the middle. UF was annihilated up front. And when that happens, you have no chance. So number 1 for me is pass rusher. They need another edge guy. Number 2, this probably won't surprise anybody either if you follow this show or know me at all. Corner. It is going to be extremely thin pickings from what I can tell so far in the portal with corner. You're going to have to be creative. You're going to have to coach somebody up. You're not going to get more than like 1 or 2 guys, I'm guessing, that enter the portal that are quote unquote borderline NFL guys, because as a rule, cornerbacks that enter the portal are guys that it just didn't work out. Discipline problems, depth chart, didn't get along with the coach, just didn't like it, homesickness. It's not because they're going to your school because they're on the edge of the NFL. If they're close, corners just leave. They go to the draft. Historically, they are the polar opposite of offensive linemen. They're the most likely to stick around the next year. Corners are most likely to head to the National Football League. That's the way it's been. So if Florida State doesn't get one of those 2, and I'm not saying on any of these positions they don't have guys. I'm just saying if you stockpile here, you're going to win. That's the key. Jones, like the kids of Mississippi, et cetera, they brought in. They've done good. Hussey could play corner or safety. I have confidence in that. I know him. They need more guys to compete, keep the depth there, rotate, and that mitigates your injury losses because they're going to happen. Corner would be number 2. I'm just afraid there aren't going to be many, so I'm curious to see what Florida State comes up with, if anything. I mean, they got Ventrell Cypress this past year. That's a heck of a pickup, and he's done really well for the Noles. Are you going to get lucky 2 years in a row like that and have somebody like that even enter the portal that you can chase? He was one of the better DBs in the ACC, and the Noles were able to snag him. That was great. If you do that 2 years in a row, that'd be absolutely fantastic. Now, this third one might surprise some people a little bit, but there's different reasons for it. If you look at what Florida State's offense has done this year, you're going to say offensive line. They need help, and I'm not disputing that. But they've got a few younger guys. We'll see who develops, and I think they need to hit offensive tackle. I'm not debating it. But depending on who leaves, if there's another, and I'm just enamored with him, Mr. Bell, the tight end / H-back / receiver / running back / he's just a football player that do everything offensive weapon. I don't really want to label it as a position. I have all the respect in the world for Jaheim Bell because he's a really difficult guy to get after because schematically, you don't know where he's going to line up. Part of that's Norvell. Part of that is Bell is such a fine-tuned athlete that he played some running back before he's at FSU. He's a guy that you can run a jet sweep with. And look how big he is. Guys like that make it horrific for the opposing team's defensive coordinator. The do-it-all playmaker guy, sign me up, bro. Sign me up. I'm not, and if there's an elite offensive tackle, and there won't be, that's the other reason I'm not going to get into the portal thing with the offensive line as my third pick. If there is one, great, but the Joe Alts of the world are going to the NFL. You know, they're not going to the portal. You got to get that guy to help offset it. Florida State's also got to get to the point where they're just getting more elite offensive linemen directly out of high school. That's what got them in the problem they were in for 4 or 5 years to begin with. Jimbo missed on some guys got hurt, different things. Anything that could go wrong for the Noles up front pretty much did with high school recruiting. A few kids hit, but for the most part, they struggled. And then this past year, they started to get better. This season, obviously, the injuries have kicked them in the teeth a little bit. Finally, on this, before we turn to the final part about the college football playoff and the quarterbacks and how that dips down to every other school, Florida State included, no matter who Florida State gets in the portal, I expect the following thing. They are going to be a team that's starting with this portal cycle, and then especially the next one after next season, they'll still be going after the Cam Wards. Sure, you have to. But because of the uptick in recruiting, I was looking at it today. I can't remember, 3rd or 4th in the 247 rankings, however much you want to put into that. But I've studied their defensive class in particular just because I'm interested in it. I think it's fun when you can just bring it like Hussey. I'll just use him as an example, the safety out of St. Thomas Aquinas because I know him. When you have kids like that are really smart, he's athletic, he's been coached, he was at St. Thomas Aquinas, and you can see the light kind of come on. Norvell's talked about him a little bit in the press conferences. When you get classes back-to-back with kids like that, and this next one bringing in, the DB class in particular, has some of that, then you don't need to hit the portal as much. There might be a guy like Ezra Thomas, those kind of guy, I mean, he's a freak. They're going to kind of take that step. So unless you really get the high-end guy, and corner could be one of those positions they ride or die with going out and getting either the top guy at corner or maybe the number 2, or they just don't mess with it. Because now you're starting to get the high school kids. They all know your system. And when you lose a kid like a Jared Verse or Ventrell Cypress, et cetera, to this thing they call the NFL, then it's not as big a deal. You're not like, oh, God, if we don't get this portal kid, we're screwed. We've got the next guy up already on the Florida State roster. I think you're going to see a little bit of a mitigated situation with the need for the portal. They may only take 8 to 10 instead of like 12 to 15 or something. That's important. Once you've gotten to the point where you can be selective and you're getting these kids, especially the Florida, Georgia kids that FSU's traditionally got to make them a top program, The portal is important, but it won't be as needed in terms of numbers. But something that is, speaking of numbers, that is important is Prize Picks. If you are into daily fantasy sports, Prize Picks is the number one daily fantasy sports in the country. It's just you against the numbers instead of you battling thousands of players, including pros and sharps. So, for instance, if you think that Florida State is going to score 30 points against Louisville, over under, or if you think they're going to score 35 over, whatever it is, that's something you can look at. Player stats. How many yards will Trey Benson rush for? If it's 80, you pick over under, and you can do combinations with different leagues, NFL, NBA, etc. Also, one other quick note, this is something that I like. There is an injury policy. If your guy gets hurt in the first half, you're rebooted. So with Prize Picks, this is pretty simple right here. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnCollege. Use code LockedOnCollege for a first deposit match of up to $100. That is prizepicks.com/LockedOnCollege and use code LockedOnCollege for a first deposit match up to $100. All right. Why does the college football playoff impact the transfer portal and vice versa? Well, they work off each other for this reason. It's very simple. Let's say Michigan wins it. I have no idea. But let's say they do. JJ McCarthy has NFL talent. But if he had a ring, do you think he'd be more apt to turn pro after his junior year? He's a third-year true junior that's at the University of Michigan playing quarterback. If Jordan Travis would have been in this situation, hadn't been injured, and he was a true junior, and he had this kind of season, he would be asking the same question. It's a little different if you come up that little bit short. So I want to go through a few things and just look at an overview. Like, let's look at this. If you think about all the different quarterbacks that have come through Alabama, LSU, obviously Jaden Daniels, Jordan Travis, some of these dynamic guys, did anybody really think Carson Beck was going to have this season that he did? They've got the best chance to win it, in my opinion, but this is his first year starting, so there's a lot of leverage there. What could get him to turn pro? If the Bulldogs do win it and he's a starting quarterback and he plays well throughout, he takes off. Well, that changes the sweepstakes. Georgia's not going to be in the Cam Ward sweepstakes if Carson Beck's coming back. Same deal with Michigan if JJ McCarthy comes back. They're not. But if those kind of programs enter the race, that changes the dynamics for everybody. And this is what I call setting the board. There are certain guys, this is something I learned a long time ago from recruiting coordinators, people at Florida State, all over Alabama, Notre Dame, all over the place. There's a certain guy that you're going to go all in for it. If you only got one spot, you got to wait. It's ride or die. Okay? Kind of like eBay Motors. It's ride or die. Ward, I got a feeling for a few schools it's going to be ride or die with him. Just going to use him as an example. I think he's the best quarterback. He hasn't entered the portal while I'm doing this. He might have since the time I started this pod, but whatever. Michigan, Florida State, Ohio State. Maybe Ohio State. Don't be shocked. Like, never know. Any of these teams that want to go into the portal and grab a quarterback, if their guy leaves and it's that big box brand, it changes everything. And then let's be honest. If you're a recruit, if you're a portal player at another position, and you see that Cam Ward signed and picked the school, whatever school it is, if they go to that school, does it change the dynamics for the recruitment for other people? Yes. Who doesn't want to win? It absolutely freaking matters. That's why this is so important. And I'm just hoping, for my own sake, I'll just be honest and be selfish about this, that whatever Cam Ward does, he does it sooner than later. It makes my life a heck of a lot easier. And I guarantee you that there are many coaches out there hoping the same, because then it gives them more time with whatever he does. Riley Leonard, again, I think he's going to Notre Dame. Most people know that. Will Rogers, etc. Wherever these guys go. And by the way, Max Johnson's going to North Carolina. He was allowed to go ahead and make that decision because his coach got fired. They get an earlier window. If that happens and Ward makes a decision, let's say early next week, by next Tuesday, he's in the portal, he makes an announcement, I'm going to school X. That will help everybody else know what they got to do. Florida State included, whether they get him or don't. Really helps when the board is set with the top couple of guys. I would expect Riley Leonard to kind of get it officially done pretty quick with it. I assume, again, it's Notre Dame or whatever. I have not heard on Will Rogers. I've heard a few schools in general, but I haven't heard any leanings. That'll be interesting because Will Rogers is a darn good quarterback, and he's thrown for a ton of yards. Big-time talent for the college level that likes the air raid. We'll see where he ends up. But to wrap up, again, portal quarterback, it changes everything, the dynamics. I think Florida State should take one. I'd be surprised if you didn't as well. If Tate Rodemaker proves me wrong and comes out and kills it against Louisville and or in the playoff, by all means, I will be happy to come on here and repent, but you have to prove it to me. I don't want to hear it until I see it. That being stated, I also think defensive end, corner, and then another playmaker on offense would be my 3 picks beyond obviously quarterback. Finally, this kind of situation comes down to this with the quarterbacks. If you get that quarterback, it's going to help you get other portal kids and maybe even some recruits for 2024. And the Noles could be right back in the college football playoff hunt yet again. With that, everybody, please hit that like button, hit that notification bell. I appreciate it. Please spread this podcast. It's a lot of fun. We're in portal season. We're in recruiting season. I'm waiting on a couple of pieces of information. I did hear some good news as it relates to Florida State and Jeremiah Smith. At least I've heard Ohio State or Florida State. It's probably going to be one of those two. We'll see. And at that, I'm waiting on some more information. I'm getting ready to head down to South Florida. So we will see very, very soon. Everybody have a good day, and thank you very much.